Hi, this is Martha from The Curious Mystic, and today I have a cozy chat with fantasy author Kate Tremills, and we are here to talk about her new release, Warrior. So, hi, Kate, and welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, Martha. Okay. Yeah, so I am a fantasy author and also an inspirational author and speaker. So these days I'm more in the flow of sharing nonfiction and my process and inspiring other creators and speaking to that, speaking to sort of creative blocks and creative flow. And my background is that for years I was a screenwriter. So I learned Malcolm Gladwell would say I really got my 10,000 hours by being in the film industry where, wow, I just lived, ate, breathed story for about 10 to 12 years actually, and with some amazing collaborators. And now I feel like story is a part of me because
Yeah,
it's kind of like when you're a pianist, you just, once you've really are in the flow and you know all the technical stuff, it's a part of you. So now
yeah.
when I write stories or when I events or that sort of thing, it's just like a part of who I am and what I do. So it's a huge part of my joy. And writing these books has been a huge part of my transformational process. So both a joy to offer them to other people and also a significant part of who I am now. So that's
Lovely. And I think your joy really comes through in the books, actually, I have to say. And I'd love to hear, what was your inspiration from the Great Land series? Where did they come from?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's funny, when I was a screenwriter, ideas would come in various forms. And I referenced that because the series actually first came through. Gabriella showed up for me when I think 2007, when I was still a screenwriter, working on very ardently on a screenplay. And she showed up essentially in a vision, like very visually, basically the scene in Messenger when she's hiding in the church, very
Yeah.
close to the beginning of the book, for me. And I had no idea who this young woman was or what she wanted to say, and at the time, I just thought, okay, this is not what I'm working on. I'm going to put that aside. And obviously, it just kept kind of working inside me and or waited, however you want to kind of see that. Because then when I left film, when I was transitioning out of film, and I actually had started writing a different novel. And she showed up again with, I was probably about a third of the way through this novel, and she showed up and was like, yeah, put that aside. You need to write this now. And at that time, I was enough in the flow, in the creative, that I could see, oh, okay, like this is coming through
Yeah.
fast and furious, and I need to respect the creative vision and the creative voice of this. And so I like to say that essentially she invited me into the Great Lands. She was my key into that kingdom.
Your messenger, in
And,
fact.
or kingdom. She was my messenger, absolutely. She opened the door and I followed, and messenger really did
Mm,
flow like receiving a message. And that was quite an exquisite process for
yeah.
me to just to really let the story lead the way and let her lead the way and trust it. It was really wonderful because when you're working in the film industry, it's actually a lot more, which is wonderful. Like at the time, I loved that there was tremendous structure and something to lean on
Mm,
and push against, that sort of thing. And again, I learned so much. Like, it was
mm.
an essential part of my becoming a creative writer. And when she showed up and I really had confidence that she would show me the way, it was such a relief to follow that and trust that and
Yeah.
let it flow and age. And then I had trusted people I could go to, like Catherine Cottam, where she read it and gave me feedback and kind of we did the editing process and the refining. When I was actually invited into the Great Lands, it was all flow. I like to say basically Gabriella showed up and showed me the way. So for me, and it doesn't mean that there aren't times where a book is more challenging. I think that's when I tend to fight the flow, or the lesson is a different, like that was the lesson of Messenger. Every book for me kind of has a lesson. And so the transformational lesson of Warrior was different. I had a different evolution that came through that book. However, it still did flow, I would say. It just took a little more strength, as being a warrior does. So as it did for her in that book. That was part of my growth through telling that book and through like just that process. And then people, I believe that the reader takes and brings what they need when they receive the book. So, yeah.
And do you know where the series is going next, or is Gabriella still very much leading the way and leading you blind as you go?
Yeah, that's.
Has she shown you?
I have senses. The next book is called. I do have a sense of where it's headed and what her journey is. However, there's always, like that is the joy of writing a creative story and following the character. Inevitably, I may think I know what her journey is, and usually I think I get glimpses.
Yeah.
And then once I'm actually in the flow of the journey, much like most things in life, once you're actually on the road or in it, you can't, it's a discovery process. Like you can't really predict what turn you're going to take, or unless you're really rigid. And these days, and certainly this series, it doesn't work for me. If I'm really rigid with it, it just does not. The story will stop. So if I get really rigid with it and say, no, we have to go this way, it's like, boom, it disappears. So I have to follow that and trust the discovery process of her and where they're headed. And sometimes it's rather surprising or uncomfortable. I did not anticipate Venora at all. So when she showed up, it was, oh, we're on for a ride. Let's go. So yeah, that was really fun, and just set a lot of stuff aside to let her lead the way on that. And so I do have a sense. I know the third book will be called Queen, and I'm not actually 100% sure that there's only 3 books, but right now that's what's showing up for me. There may be more, which is why it's rather than saying how many books there are in it. Yeah, so I think I've answered your question, but I have senses, and I've certainly received glimpses of the third book. However, I know it's the way that this series works and the way that the characters work is that they will, when they're ready, they show up for me, and that's when I start to write, and then discovering it is quite an adventure.
Yeah.
It's really joyful.
So you have 2 main antagonists. One is Venora, who you were just talking about, and you also have the Great Prince. And the Great Prince, for most of the story so far, has been the antagonist, hasn't he? And he is quite unconscious, led by his palace, which is this kind of sentient building. But Venora is really different, isn't she? Because she's like a really, really like super conscious character, really kind of knows what's going on and what she's doing, and quite kind of manipulative, and so real kind of contrast to the prince. And I was wondering whether there was any, because you've also got the two protagonists in Gabriella and Hannah, and I was wondering whether there was any kind of correspondence between those, so the 2 protagonists and the 2 antagonists.
Right. Yeah, it was really interesting for me as well when I was writing it to have a second antagonist show up, and one who essentially had wielded that kind of power, especially when she walks right into his court and effectively takes control of his court. He can see that happening. So it's really interesting that she's not just a threat to Adrian and Gabriella and Hannah, she's a threat to the Great Prince as well. And so, interesting, and I love the 2 sides of one coin, so it's similarities. So in a sense, with the Great Prince and Venora, they've both been deeply, deeply wounded. And they are being run by their wounds. And so it's interesting, yeah, that the Great Prince, for the most part, is very unconscious of it being. Benora is very conscious, so
Yeah.
she's certainly kind of taken that on and decided that this is her form of power. And yet there are times, certainly, I think, where she's, they flip, where he's conscious and she's unconscious.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel with Benora that it's what felt like the channel of power that was available to her. And certainly when you are in that kind of dark flow, it's really potent. I think what she doesn't realize is how much it's burning her up rather than fueling her. So it feels just like sometimes if you give in to rage and when you act on rage, I should say, and direct it towards someone else, as opposed to just kind of flowing through it and letting it out and, being responsible for it and that sort of thing. And there's a bigger power available to you. What she does is she actually directs it and uses powers, you're right, very, very consciously, because I think it feels very powerful. What she doesn't quite get is that it's destroying her at the same time. So even the longer that she uses it, the more it's going to destroy her.
Yeah.
That's just inevitable. I think she just doesn't necessarily have the wisdom, or the internal insight to see that. She's so run by her, the way that she was personally destroyed, that she just seeks to destroy others and is stuck in kind of feeling power of that. I think with the Great Prince, he's such a fascinating, and I love all my characters. It's hard not to when you're a writer, and you got to kind of roll with what their wisdom is. And it's just really interesting with the Great Prince. Somehow it's easier for me to feel sympathetic for him because he's unconscious. Yet at the same time, it's like both of them are making a choice.
Yeah,
and that's similar. And so we can choose to be unconscious and believe that someone else is. Or let someone else pull our strings, which is essentially what's happening.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where, you need to, and he needs to take on his own strings and find the courage to basically run his own life, which when you've let someone else do it for you for a long time is very disorienting and very difficult. And it's, you're almost like coming back into your body for him. So it's funny, like, ultimately I see the big antagonist as the hidden palace, really.
Yeah.
And it is who Gabriella has to go towards. The hidden palace will be the next layer, really. And so, and I love that you've actually asked about how that works for Gabriella and Hannah, too, because I often forget and then remember that they are twins.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're two sides of one coin, or if they're, yes and no. So they're both very distinct people, very distinct characters, and yet they kind of are two expressions of one woman in a way.
Yeah.
So Gabriella, I always see, very like forward leaning and action taking, and Hannah is more and flow with the wisdom. So in a way, and it'll be interesting to see if that shifts in the third book, which it may, but at the moment, Gabriella is slightly more the masculine embodiment of a feminine energy, and Hannah is, the feminine embodiment of a more feminine energy. And I think she's got less, she's got less guidance for it because she has to trust her inside. I think that's where coming home is really significant for her, because there is an inner guidance there that she's tapping into, and that there's less sort of obvious direction. They're also transitioning, like the Great Lands is transitioning through this journey. So they're bringing back an old energy. So it is interesting that they are two sides of one coin, and yet very much distinct women with their own distinct journey and challenges, and they will, I think, feel even more different in Queen, because they'll use each other's strength more, as opposed to being so separated. Warrior was really interesting how separated all the characters were. Like these characters that come to Messenger, are very separated in Warrior, and it's like they have to find their inner warrior, their inner strength, their own particular call. I know that they will come back together and bring their personal strength to the next battle.
Oh, I
So.
can't wait. I can't wait. Sounds great. We touched in that on these sentient buildings. So there's the Great Palace, and there's also Gabriella and Hannah's home, which is also now starting to seem like it's sentient. So again, we've got this duality, these two different places, and it's I love this idea of these sentient buildings. And as someone who will go into a building and very much pick up on the feel of a place and that kind of thing, that I love the way these buildings have this life of their own and can communicate and everything. So I'd love to hear more about that and kind of where the idea came from and the part that you see that playing in the story and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like everything with Messenger, it really did come in the flow, so it surprised me as well as an friend. And I know I had to get past my own potential judgments and just let the story flow with that. Well, I know, like you, when I've been to various places, I really feel the energy of them, and I really feel the energy of building the people who have inhabited them. But I know also very much, everything that's gone into creating that place. So I really do feel that energy. And I also know that when we go back before sort of the rational revolution like Descartes and things like that, and back when we had more ancient connection to places, that there many cultures believed in the soul of various trees and animals and places and stones. And so somewhere like Stonehenge was, those stones actually were in the spirit and soul and energy. So it's not actually, it's funny, it's like it feels like a revolutionary idea, and at the same time it's a very ancient idea.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to me, and also a lot more powerful. It's like the Hidden Palace is imbued with the hatred and rage and pain and of many people, which is far more powerful and potent than a single despot, than a single person wielding power. When there's and I suspect that that's why it's going to take the many to take her down. And then the original birthplace of home of both Hannah and Gabriella, it's interesting because it's in ruins, and there's, avoid any spoilers, but there's basically, a lot of negative things going on there. That the part of, I think, Hannah going back is to reconnect with that and to, in a sense, wake up that ancient energy so that she can draw on that and bring it. So there's going to be a necessary journey for her, a transformational journey for her. Like Gabriella, when she finds the pools, which we kind of see in the very beginning scene with the moon, and she gets that vision of where she needs to go. So yeah, it's I've been more moved and more power of place than individual people. I've certainly been changed by a lot of people. I feel like that's an essential part of this story and an essential part of everyone's journey. And essentially, because they are transforming the great lands, it's something that they that they both tap into and need to. So I don't know why, but it's interesting that I'm just following the latest Game of Thrones, and they're not explicit about it, but when Khaleesi has to go back to the birthplace of her people and the with the dragon glass and all that sort of thing, they're certainly not like outright and explicit, but that there is something about that place that can explain it rationally. And then there's another way where it's like she's feeding on the power of her ancestors and the place and all the components and all the history of that building. And it feels like for Hannah, that's why, despite all the dangers, despite all odds, despite like the calling for her was to go home, and she knew it was the last thing her sister wanted, and probably the most dangerous and the most exposing thing that she could do, and yet, and she really didn't know why. So So yeah, it's really interesting that I know that where this series is going is ultimately it's going to be for people to reclaim and kind of have the battle of place and
Yeah.
how do you reclaim, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you talked briefly in there about the bit where Gabriella talks to the moon at the beginning, and I love that part of the book. That really touched a chord in me, that bit. And there's also a sense in there that she realizes that it's not enough to try and fix everything for the people. So the people are oppressed and things aren't going okay, and she's this powerful and important messenger, but it isn't enough for her to do it for them, and she realizes that she needs to work with them and help them to save themselves. And I wondered whether there
Mhm.
was any connection in there into what is happening in the world at the moment, whether there was any kind of political tie-in, or whether that feels entirely separate. Or
Well, it's funny because I wrote the book a couple of years ago and then refined it last year before it was published.
mm,
It definitely before the current powers that be were in power.
yeah.
However, what I would say is that it definitely has always felt to me that this series was in line with where
Mm,
our world is going, or
yeah.
where we are going as a species and as a planet, and the transformations that need to happen for us. And I knew, it's funny, I don't know if I knew when I wrote Messenger, but I certainly knew once I entered Warrior, this was a shift in meme or theme around like so many fantasy novels have been, we're still kind of rooted in the very masculine
Mm,
energy of there's a single person, there's a single savior, there's a single
mm,
warrior that comes and rescues everyone or has to sacrifice themselves for everyone.
yeah.
And I knew that this series was a deep shift in that she might start from that place.
Mm,
However, she would come to a place where she realized might be like the lightning pole or the lightning rod kind of thing. Like while she may be the gathering force,
mm,
that it's just not feasible, and it just like there was no way for her to actually be the only transformational
yeah.
piece. That it was going to require the strength of the entire people, and that's where I love your question because it really does feel like that is what's happening
Yeah.
now. Like people are realizing, like the Great Prince, that they have to wake up from being unconscious,
Mm,
and it may be disorienting, and it feel like our legs are a little weak, or it may feel like we haven't had to walk this walk before, and it's really essential that like that's how this is going to shift. That's how that's how ultimately really that's how despots are unseated. And especially if we want it less than just taking them down, which would be a single act, a single sort of um, masculine approach. I'm
mm,
not denigrating that at all. I really believe in the power of masculine and feminine working together. Um, but it's like that single like toppling of, we certainly saw that in Iraq as well. When you topple the despot, that's a single act.
mm,
It's not the creation of something. So you can topple something, however, you need like the energy and the beauty of all the people that want to create something. You need that, which is a little more feminine, where it's
yeah.
uniting and creating together, and a united vision. That's what we're going to need right now, even when those powers that be are no longer in power. In order to put something different in place,
Mm,
that's where we all need to rise up and be our true song, to be our true selves, to actually make that happen together and learn how to and feel like we're all in competition. So, there's, yeah, I feel like it's definitely resonating with what's happening now. It's
mm,
certainly like metaphorical in that way. It's not how the originating idea comes to me or how
yeah.
it flows through me. However, I love that that tends to be a theme in my stories, where a story comes through me and it resonates with the times that are happening. So I love that. That's part of the fun for me. And definitely a big part of the fun of hearing from readers
Yeah.
and what they get from it and what they see and what they get from it and where they, because then it's like once I've put it out in the world, that's where that's where it goes. Like it's once it's in the hands of readers and they take it forth, they tell the story out in the world. And that's when it is really exciting to see that happen.
Lovely. And talking about those readers, they can find your books on Amazon, and it's Messenger is the first book in the series. And the latest one that we've just been talking about is Warrior. And you have another series out, don't you, called Blue Moon, which is also
that's
on there. Yeah. And some short stories, I think, about fairy tales. Is that right?
Yeah, so with Catherine Cottam and Roberta Cottam, we did a couple of collections, one in particular called Fabled, where we retell fairy tales and myths, which was super fun, and still they're some of my very favorite tales. And I love that because I feel like stories are always alive and want to be current. Basically why people retell Shakespeare and also myths and fairy tales is because there's key parts of them that we all resonate with.
Yeah.
They're so, the stories are so ancient, and those little pieces are universal, essentially. And they really did, I think, come from all over the world. I mean, even Shakespeare obviously, went to Italy and took stories and then brought them back and riffed on. So that was totally what he was up to as well. It's just, that's what we are as humans. We love to take those elements that resonate with all of us, that are ancient and that we understand on an internal level. It's not even rational. We just do that the current energy, the current people, basically the current language resonates with, then you're taking that, that ancient energy and you're putting it in the current milieu, the current situation, and it's really powerful. That's when things just kind of light up for folks, and you get to receive it in a different way, which is super exciting when you get to actually just read something that you understand on a core level, and yet it's kind of like wearing a different costume or that sort of thing. Like you just get to try it on in a different guise, which is super fun. That's half the fun of life is so.
And would you like to tell us about your new venture? You're starting a new blog, aren't you? About kind of inspirational, like creativity and that kind of thing. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've created a different Facebook page where I microblog, and for now it's on Facebook. It probably will have a location online, like on a website as well. But it just, much like how I created the series, I really like to stay in the creative flow of what changes me, what moves me, what's like most inspiring for me. And that's a lot of what I talk about. I really want people to be in the flow of who they are in the moment and what's calling them, like feeling that call through your heart. And so for now, what I knew was most exciting and most challenging and most invigorating, what brought me alive basically is the action side of things. So, and that's kind of, again, it's like waking up to something that's a new way to move. So it's very new for me to share my story, to share how I'm inspired, to share what I'm doing every day, and just do it in a way. But that's like I said, that's really half the excitement. It's the same way that Gabriella showed up for me when I was a screenwriter. Wait a minute, I don't write novels, I write screenplays, and I don't know how to do the creative flow thing. So it's that kind of energy for me with the nonfiction, where I know that that's where the fun and the evolution and the personal transformation is. And that's what I like to, showing me a way that like my heart knows before my mind does. So it's like, as long as I can tell my mind everything's going to be okay, we're just like going to follow this and it'll all be good. You'll get it in the end. And I think that's kind of an ancient way. We used to allow our wisdom in through our heart, and then we'd go to our brain in order to just reference, oh, okay, right, does this, like, what's the logical step here? How do I actually move forward with this? And the brain would go, oh, yeah, okay, I've got a plan, I get it. Here's what I suggest. And then your heart would check in and go, yep, okay, or nope, that's not, again. And that is like the powerful way. I know and resonate with a lot of speakers who talk about, like Greg Braden and Christiane Northrup and Kate Northrup, and Crystal Verba, and like just who speak about when you, and Wayne Dyer, when you follow the tremendous, it's actually a tremendous nerve. It's got the same amount of neurons, I guess, as the brain. It's actually what we used to always follow, and it's a hugely magnetic force. So I'm very much about like when you follow your heart and then you use your brain to check in. It's kind of like someone I went to see who talks about your heart is the CEO and the brain is the CFO. So it knows kind of how to crunch the numbers and how to tell you whether you've got enough in the bank and that kind of stuff, enough energy in your, and then you go back to the heart, and your heart ultimately knows the vision and the path. And the two work together, like they're really essential. However, this is very much about me following my heart and offering that and seeing where it goes and inspiring others to do the same, especially being in the creative flow. And it's an opportunity for me to actually show my comedic side, which I used to do when I was a screenwriter. I wrote comedy as well.
Oh, fabulous.
And that, yeah, so it's a natural part of me to be kind of playful. So, which is a little different than say, the Great Land series, which is a little more, I don't know if serious is the right word, but just a different energy, more peaceful and that kind of thing. This is a little more playful for me, where I get to kind of, riff with the energy of the day, and I really love it. The same happens for me when I speak. I love doing speaking events, and I've been doing more of them because it's being in the creative flow for me, and especially being in the creative flow with other people.
Yeah.
Being an author can be like, it can be, and I want it to be very inclusive for a lot of authors, and to know that actually it can be a collaborative process. However, for me, when the book comes through me, it's that solitary time. And so this is really fun to get to, play with others and dialogue with others and just feel the energy of that and flow with it. So they're different, and both are really nourishing. It's just right now I'm in a time of where I want to like flow with nonfiction and inspiration and offering that to others. And that's what that page is. So it's actually, I've got two now, one for my fantasy author who is K.M. Tremills, and then Kate Tremills, author and speaker, is the Facebook page where I'd love for people to join me if they want to that creative flow and feeling into their heart and knowing what their creative journey is and how to do that. Yeah.
Lovely. And where else can people find you online? Do you have a website or Twitter or?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So KM Tremills, so KM Tremills, Tremills, is my website where you can find my books and various blogs and where I'm going to be speaking, events and things like that, who I'm partnering with. And then I'm on Instagram primarily and Twitter. So Twitter is Kate Tremills, and that's my full name. And then Instagram is actually KM Tremills. And both are really fun for me. They're like places where you can definitely connect with me, whichever vibes for you. And obviously Facebook, like I mentioned. But I love those ways of expressing words, pictures. Facebook Live. I'll definitely be doing some Facebook Live, which is going to be super fun.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And please do look Kate up. And if you would like to see more blogs, interviews, energy readings, you can visit my website, which is www.marthadunlop.com. So do find me there. I also offer intuitive tarot readings and Reiki for Ascension. So please do go and have a look. And I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.